Previously on WandaVision.
Tyler, where's my mom? Maria died 3 years ago. 2 years after you disappeared.
Captain Monica Rambeau.
Director Tyler Hayward.
The program hasn't been the same since you've been up there, Rambeau. The FBI isn't a tizzy up in Jersey.
This isn't a missing persons case, Captain Rambeau. It's a missing town.
Some sort of energy field.
My equipment registered an extremely high level of CMBR. Entwined was a broadcast frequency. Voila, sound and picture.
You are trespassing here, and I want you to leave.
Where is Geraldine?
She's gone. She didn't belong here.
It's all Wanda.
Okay, we're back for another WandaVision review, and wow, just wow. This episode, titled On a Very Special Note, was insane and probably the best one yet, so with so many exciting things to break down, let's get into it. Last week's episode was a huge turning point for the show. This episode was a really nice blend of sitcom stuff with Westview and the sword investigation in the real world. The family ties inspired episode jumps into the 80s as we see Wanda and Vision continuing to live their not so normal suburban lives with all the strange problems that came before, plus the difficulties of parenthood. Of course, if you remember in episode 3, Wanda gave birth to twins Billy and Tommy, who start this episode off as babies, but throughout it age up very rapidly, and it seems to only happen when they're around Agnes, so this could either simply be one of Billy's powers starting to manifest as he warps reality, or it could be something far more sinister. Could it be that Agnes is creating situations that make them age up, warping their minds and bodies until they're old enough to be of use to her, and maybe even her secret master Mephisto? Seriously, we're not giving up on this whole Mephisto thing. Watch him not even show up. The first time the boys age up is when they're under the care of Agnes, and they just jump to 5 years old, where Agnes says,
Kids. Can't control them. No matter how hard you try.
The second time is when they find a dog and they're told that they can't have a dog until they're at least 10 years old, so the boys look at each other and morph into 10-year-olds, an age at which they stay at till the end of the episode. Agnes was also present during this age up, much like she is when the boys try to age up a third time when their dog dies, before Wanda tells them not to and teaches them that death is inevitable, and that although it's sad, you can't change it or run away from it. Well, at least some people can't, Wanda. But we'll talk about that a little more later. As I mentioned, the family get a dog this episode called Sparky. Now, some of you might know that name as he actually appeared in the 2014 series by Tom King called The Visions, which the show pulls a lot of elements from. Another thing that is heavily featured in this episode is Vision's ever-growing skepticism about Westview and the strange happenings and people within it. In this episode, we see him return to work, and now that they're in the 80s, they've got computers. When Vision is taking a look at Norm's computer, he notices an incoming message from Sword, which only escalates his suspicions, and leads to him momentarily freezing Norm's mind, turning him back into himself, where he freaks out and says,
Please help me. What day is it? How long has it been? Where's my phone? I have to call my sister.
No.
She's taking care of our dad. He's sick. Where's my phone?
Calm yourself, Norm. I can't understand what you're trying to tell me.
You have to stop her.
Stop who?
She's in my head. None of it is my own. It hurts. It hurts so much. Just make her stop. Just make her stop!
Now, it's likely that he's talking about Wanda here, but notice how he only says she and not any specific name, which could suggest that Wanda is telling the truth, that she's not controlling people and it's actually Agnes who's behind all of this. Another moment that raises Vision's suspicion is when Agnes arrives at the house and offers to look after the kids. Vision is hesitant to let her, which leads to a moment where she asks to retake the scene, but when Vision talks to Wanda about it, she doesn't seem to see what he saw. Either that or she's simply ignoring it and pretending like nothing was wrong. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, there's a nice balance between Westview scenes and Sword scenes, so let's talk about what's going on in the real world. We first pick up with Monica after this episode's intro, which might I add features a very terrifying baby Vision, where she's tested on and mentions how she felt under Wanda's control, as we see flashes of her in Westview, and one shot of a crying Wanda from modern day in what looks like the real Westview. Perhaps this is a glimpse of a potential flashback later in the show. The Doctor then comes over to her saying that there's something wrong with the machine while showing her a picture of her scan, which looks to have captured a glowing white light over her body, a similar white light to the energy beams that Monica emits when she gains her superpowers. So I'm thinking that she already has her superpowers when Wanda attacked her, but doesn't realise it yet. In a meeting with Director Hayward, we learn that 9 days prior to this episode, Wanda broke into a Sword headquarters, which was the top secret location of Vision's corpse, busted him out and resurrected him. Funnily enough, this was actually the concept for a post-credit scene that was cut from Avengers Endgame, which never got past the concept art stage. When planning on how to fix the situation, we see Monica talking about how she needs a fallout shelter on wheels made of lead for photons and other materials, but it seems that Marvel is really going hard with the photon references, so I'm expecting to see her suit up sometime soon. I'm also guessing that said machine is this thing that we've seen in the trailers. Monica then goes on to say that she knows an aerospace engineer who'd be up for this challenge, and we've been thinking of who this could be. The answer that a lot of people have speculated about is Reed Richards or Victor Von Doom, which we also thought of, but another option that Brandon brought up, which I'm yet to see anyone else think of, is Blue Marvel, who in the comics is a genius engineer and physicist. Although if you watch this scene with the Spanish subtitles, which I don't know why you would if you're not Spanish, she does use the feminine word for engineer, so it's probably someone totally different like Talos' daughter, which we saw her befriend in Captain Marvel. Also in this scene, Darcy calls Wanda's Westview bubble the Hex, which is a cool reference to her Hex powers in the comics, and the repeated hexagonal shape that shows up in the show. Figuring out that Wanda is not just creating illusions with her Hex, she's changing reality itself. This one scene is the gift that keeps on giving, because we get another callback to Avengers Endgame where Monica mentions that Wanda could have taken out Thanos on her own if he hadn't initiated a blitz and that no one else came close to, which Jimmy Woo replies, well, I'd argue that Captain Marvel came close, and Monica seems both sad and pissed off at mentioning of her name. I guess we might find out what that's all about in some time in the future, but maybe she just feels like Carol abandoned them, or that she could have done something to save her mum. Like episodes 1 to 3, we get an ad break in this episode which features a Legos paper towel, with the slogan, Legos, for when you make a mess that you didn't mean to. Now if you've forgotten, and I wouldn't blame you, Legos is the place in Nigeria where Wanda blew up the building in Captain America Civil War. We then pick up with Wanda and the boys once again while Vision is at work. We see that Sword has sent a drone from the 80s so that it doesn't get warped into Westview to communicate with Wanda, which only pisses her off and leads to a terrifyingly intimidating scene where Wanda, dressed in her Scarlet Witch costume, walks out of the Hex carrying the drone, telling them to stay out of her home. Interestingly enough, she seems to have a Sokovian accent again for some reason, even though it had only appeared that she'd lost it by the time Captain America Civil War rolled around. Funnily enough, this isn't the only confrontation Wanda faces in this episode, as we get to see a really dramatic scene between Wanda and Vision where she confronts her about what she's doing to the people of Westview, and how she has to stop. He says to her, "You can't control me the way you do them," to which she replies, "Can't I?" which leads to a very heated argument like we've never seen before. The credits start to roll over the top of this scene, indicating that Wanda is trying to shut down the conversation. Vision tells her that he can't remember his life before Westview, that he doesn't even know who he is, and he's scared, and she tells him she doesn't even know how this started in the first place, indicating that even although she seems to be in control, there are still some elements behind all of this that remain a mystery even to her. All of this then leads to the biggest thing to happen in WandaVision yet. As it looks like we're about to get Wanda letting go and telling Vision the truth, someone comes to the door and interrupts them. In the Sword command tent, Darcy rushes to her workstation as she grabs her notebook, but something catches her eye on the vintage TV as she sinks into her seat. Vision asks Wanda who it is, and we see a man with silver hair from behind, standing on their front doorstep. We then see that it's Quicksilver, more specifically Evan Peters. Yes, the same actor from the Fox X-Men films.
You didn't see that coming?
He smiles and steps inside and hugs Wanda. Vision looks skeptical, and Wanda looks confused to see her brother standing in front of her. And this is where the episode ends. At first we had some theories that were put on our Twitter that Brandon runs, and you can go check that out in the description, but this was before we realised that if you turn on the audio description settings, you can hear it say, "In Westview, Wanda stares at the version of Pietro from the X-Men films." This is mind-blowing, as now we have our first multiverse element in the MCU, now tying in the Fox universe. Leave a comment on what you think about this episode and your theories for the future because we'd love to know what you think.